Well, thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm standing behind Craig, I think, as a metaphor, because for the past 2 years, I kind of feel like I've had Craig's back. But really, in fact, it's the other way around. Craig has been just an absolutely astounding and effective proponent of veterans' issues. What we're going to talk to you about a little bit today is sort of customer service writ large. And so you can imagine I feel a little bit uncomfortable even talking about that issue with a guy like Craig Newmark on the stage, the guy who actually invented customer service. So we've got a couple of brief slides for you just to set up the conversation. And everything that I'm about to say with regards to convenience, access, reliability, security, all these things I want you to hear in the context of veteran convenience, veteran access, veteran security. This is really what we're doing inside of the VA right now, taking these monolithic closed platforms, things where we had a lot of data but we weren't really very good about sharing it. Not just sharing it with veterans, but sharing it with other agencies, even sometimes with authorized vendors. But we weren't very good at that, and we're trying now to take these monolithic platforms and break them up and make them more usable to our constituency, the 25 million veterans in the United States, and useful to our stakeholders and partners, sister agencies and vendors. So the most important thing from my perspective, and one of the things that we brought in a couple of years ago to an agency that had the reputation, you've heard me say this before, that had the reputation of sort of being moribund and not very forward-leaning and not customer service focused, is to start taking some of these assets, these fabulous assets, lots of things that we know in the health domain, lots of things that we know about compensation and pension and service-connected disability payments, lots of things that we know about Chapter 33 and education benefits. And working with our partners specifically at the DoD, but other federal agencies as well, talk about scaling the platform. And really that was one of the first and largest impediments that we had. It wasn't that we weren't interested in doing it, we really didn't know how. And the first thing that you talk about when you're having these enterprise software development discussions is, okay, it's great that we can do this for 1,000 people, and it's better if we can do it for 10,000. What does the conversation look like, and what does the platform look like when you're talking about 10 million people? I know a guy who serves 65 million a month, right? I mean, that's a lot. These are big numbers, and we put them up there on purpose to start talking in a sort of meaningful, tangible way about what we mean when we say scale. One of the changes that we've made, and Craig and I are going to talk about this in a couple seconds, one of the changes that we've made is not so much about the technology platform. I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. It's sort of in my lane, and I'm good at that. Or the business process re-engineering, where you've got people like Scott Gould and the Sammy Award winner Tom Grams and arguably the best CIO in the federal government, Roger Baker, talking about business process re-engineering. But really the problem is about culture change. The problem is getting people to believe in themselves, getting people to trust themselves, getting people to accept the fact that what we're doing is inherently risky. You don't want to take unnecessary risks. You never take a risk when it comes to private data, right? I'm not talking about that. But taking platform risks, what would it look like if? What would it look like if we were on Facebook? What would it look like if we were on Twitter? What would it look like if we had a website that people actually enjoyed using? What would it look like if we started making some of our health records available in a secure, authentic way to veterans? And so what we're trying to do really at a cultural level at the VA is get ourselves out of this idea that somehow we and only we can create the applications. We know our veterans better than everybody else. We know technology better than everybody else. We know the laws and the policies better than everybody else. One of those things is true. We know our veterans pretty darn well anyway, but what we don't know is what the applications are. Nobody does, right? There's a couple of companies that have been magnificently gifted at this, and instead of looking out and trying to guess what those applications are or should be, we're now looking in and we're making sure that we're providing secure, reliable, authentic data. And so what we're trying to do is get government out of the applications business and into the data business. And one of those examples is this thing that we call Blue Button, which is, you're going to laugh if you know the technology behind it. This is an ASCII file with the data that you would put on a clipboard when you went to see your clinical provider. So what's your name? What's your spouse's name, or who should I call in case of an emergency? What insurance information do you want me to know? Why are you here? And what medicines are you on? Now, it ends up that when we announced this, or actually President Obama announced this about a year ago, and we went live 13 months ago, there were something like 5 data chapters, and it was really and almost literally the data that you would put onto a clipboard. Fast forward now 13 months later, and there's 17 data chapters, and Blue Button has, let me say, gone viral, right? We have almost 500,000 users. DoD has one, CMS has one, Aetna just went live with one, Microsoft, and a long list of partners that have been fantastically helpful, understanding that we're trying to shift the culture from this idea where we know what to do with the data, and we want to make applications to know what we only are going to be providing the data, and we're going to let the market figure out what to do with it after that. So you can imagine that this color, and I'd ask you to indulge me for a second, what if it wasn't blue? What if it was green? And we were talking about your energy consumption data. What if it was red and we were talking about your student loan? What if it was some other color where really inside the federal government, Blue Button now has become a model, I would say the mantra of opening up the data resources. Doing this in a safe way, I can't emphasize this enough. Safe, reliable, secure, authentic, but making sure that citizens, in our case veterans, have access to their data. So that was my 7-minute talk. And now we will have a discussion. Is that right? Good.
Okay. Peter, I've been working with Veterans Affairs for a couple of years now, and with a whole bunch of other government agencies of different sorts, most of it pretty quiet. But I see you guys are doing some for real innovative work. You have a formal program working with both frontline employees and vendors, which is actually getting results. Mm-hmm. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. Well, as you well know, we ran one of the first employee competitions inside the federal government. In the fullness of time, we've had something like 50,000 people participate across the VA in some way, shape, or form, either by submitting an idea or by evaluating an idea or by commenting. And now many of these ideas are in the process of being implemented. Let me tell you about one specifically, which you helped pick, which is this ability. It was a policy change fundamentally, but it was a policy change that required some technology infrastructure that allowed veterans to go outside of the VA to get evaluated for their service-connected disabilities. Now, it sounds like, well, you know, that's something you'd want to talk about and think about carefully, and you need to worry about fraud, and you need to worry about getting the data back in. But here's something I bet you didn't think about. It ends up that in order to do that in the most efficient and effective way, we had to create, sit down, we had to create an electronic form. Astounding, right? Earth-shaking. So we created this form, and then one of the partners inside of the VA said, oh, wait a second. You guys just made a web-based form for doctors to fill out for service-connected disabilities? Why did you just make one? So because, and this is the beautiful thing about innovation inside of the VA, because of one thing, because one person in Pittsburgh had this idea about a policy change that required a very, very simple, of course you know this better than anybody, a very simple change from a technology infrastructure perspective. We made that change, which was an explosion of innovation, and now fast forward just less than 2 years later, we've got somebody like 70 of them. Every single service-connected disability now has a web-enabled form, and these are the front end. This is the ingestion mechanism, the way that we actually pull the data in to an automated claims processing system, which we're piloting now.
Well, this requires some real cultural change. I think you had to get your secretary behind this and all that, which I guess is tough in Washington.
Well, not for me, right? It was quite the contrary. It was my secretary saying, listen, young man, here's how it's going to be, right? And I kind of alluded to this in the 4-slide Prezi, but really what Secretary Shinseki is all about is culture change, right? President Obama tapped my boss to come in and transform the VA into a forward-leaning, customer-centered something, again, you know about, 21st century agency. So I know that in Washington, culture change is hard. We have the second largest bureaucracy, over 300,000 people, but we've got the best secretary, so it worked out.
Well, this kind of culture change is needed and tough at lots of large organizations. It's not just government. It's once you get more than 150 people, communication starts breaking down.
Yeah.
But focusing on government for the moment, how can we reproduce this kind of culture change?
Well, I love that question. So this is something that I'm sort of modestly proud of, right? Because some of these programs like the Fast Track Claims Processing System, or Blue Button behind us, or Veeler as an example, or open source, we haven't talked about that yet and I hope we will, are becoming models of how other agencies can do it. So if you're finding yourself sort of in a real moribund place, whether you're in a sub-agency in a large bureaucracy, or maybe you have access, as I'm privileged to the secretary's office, and you can say, hey, listen, we're not just making this up anymore. It's not just some private sector guys with big mouths who swashbuckling through and making stuff happen. We can actually demonstrate how this works inside of the federal bureaucracy. That's a colossal win, and it really lowers the barriers to a lot of other places.
Well, this means also getting the word out.
Yes.
And making it be cool.
So we rely on you for that.
Well, that's right. You rely on people outside, because this stuff really does matter. It means better return for the taxpayer dollar. No one's covering this in the press typically, not in the broad mainstream press. So I guess we need a lot of people talking about this in a lot of places.
Yeah, I think it would be fabulous if we could see a somewhat higher public profile. But I come from a place really where your work speaks for itself, and the real incentive in getting the word out is to make sure that veterans understand what services and web-enabled services are available to them already, whether it's access to their health records, monitoring the compensation and service-connected disability decisions, education. We're working right now very hard on some veteran employment initiatives, which we're going to announce next month. So getting the word out for me is getting the word out to veterans.
Yeah. Well, speaking as a nerd and something of a smartass, I should think of a question to ask you so that you can talk about the social media work the VA is doing, particularly medical centers, so that they can do better outreach to veterans throughout the whole country.
Yeah.
What would you like to say about that I just haven't implied already?
Okay, well that's not a smart-ass question. I was expecting
that's kind of a
more.
smart-ass question.
Right. So as you know, the VA, I think, may have been the last cabinet agency, it certainly was one of the last cabinet agencies to actually have the policy shift, the cultural shift, as you described a couple seconds ago, that put us onto Facebook, right? And so we started kind of at a disadvantage, at a handicap. Fast forward to today, we are the #1 friended cabinet agency on Facebook. And that's great, right? That's a huge accomplishment, to the credit of the OPIA team generally and to Brandon Friedman specifically. But and there's two aspects of that. So first of all, there's twice a day somebody is saying something to veterans that they want to know. Sometimes it's a discussion thing, sometimes it's news from the secretary or pointers to your favorite blogger, some stuff like that. And then what happened was, as soon as the hospitals recognized how useful the social media was and how bidirectional it really has become, then each of the medical centers now has their own, where you can get information that you need. I don't think you can make an appointment yet, but you can find out, what are the services specific to that center that you can gain access to.
Well, also, I think you have some new policy which allows VA employees to engage with customers, veterans.
Yeah.
How's that working so far?
I'm loving it. So we're really opening the aperture of access, right? This is, again, about customer service. And you can imagine that every now and then, it's 25 million folks who are not shy about expressing their opinions about a wide variety of things. Let me tell you what didn't happen. So whenever you create a platform, and you know this well, whenever you create a platform that has millions of people, I think you said 150, I think that's about the right threshold, somebody is going to do something they shouldn't do, right?
Yeah.
They're going to talk about race in an inappropriate way, or gender, or lifestyle, or in some way they might share personal information, which isn't unethical, it's just unwise because you're putting stuff out there that anybody could see. And here's what happened on the 50,000 people, the 50,000 employees that are using our web-enabled services basically as an automated suggestion box. Clever and automated suggestion box, the Facebook pages, it hardly ever happens. I mean, in the case of the employee competition, it never happened, not once. And very occasionally you'll find somebody who may have been up too late that night and couldn't think of anything better to do and says something on the Facebook that we don't appreciate or wouldn't want public. Well,
so the lesson is that you can put regular employees engaging directly with customers then.
Absolutely.
They'll do the right thing, and getting into trouble will be a rare thing, reminiscent of my history actually at IBM, but that's a different story.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, but the deal is that connecting people even in the medical centers to the community that they directly support.
Yeah. It ties very nicely back to something that you mentioned a couple minutes ago, which is, and this is something that you don't find in government, but that you do find at the VA, which is it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay if you make a suggestion that doesn't work. It's okay if you work on a project because we may kill it quickly, but that's actually good for you, right? That's good for everybody. And it's okay if you want to have direct customer interaction, but you say something that we wish you wouldn't have said.
Do you let people know that, well, like Brandon has gotten a certain amount of verbal abuse on Facebook.
Yeah.
He's apparently developed a thick skin. Do people know about this?
Yeah. He gets a lot of love inside and outside the VA.
Well, yeah, the deal there, okay, so that right now you have a successful effort where employees are providing that kind of customer support.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of veteran outreach going on.
Yeah.
Is this kind of thing, is it possible to reproduce it throughout the whole federal government?
It really is, and you're seeing that more and more. I think of State Department as an agency that's using this very effectively. The military services are really excellent about this, providing useful quality information in a regular, reliable cadence. So the bidirectionality, the customer service of these web-enabled tools, I think, is really starting to proliferate throughout the federal government.
Yeah, and I think you guys, know that GSA, and the day was opened up by Dave McClure, and his team, has run this national dialogue on improving federal websites. Do you know of some of the specific results there?
I don't. I think it's a relatively new initiative, and honestly, it sounds funny, but I just got the memo, so so I wouldn't be able to report on sort of the concrete implementation impacts yet.
Well, I'm cheating because I was a part of it, focusing on customer service. And so this was just using idea scale, which is a way of people submitting ideas and voting them up and down. And the one which got the most interest was simply to get people on Fed websites to speak in plain language. Instead of writing like you're talking to someone else in government, the idea is just to write like you're talking to someone, clearly, but in plain language and down-to-earth language. Others had to do with, just focusing in Fed websites on, hey, a person's going to come there who just wants to get something done, and they want that. Sticking my neck out slightly, it feels, there was a consensus, I think, that emerged that people don't want to see welcome messages on a site. They don't want to see a lovely welcome video from someone. They just want, and they don't want the mission statement. They just want you to get to the point, to get things done. Yep. Is that too provocative a statement to make out here?
No, not at all.
Okay, because I think I said that out loud.
Oh, yeah, you did. Yeah, that was not the inside voice.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
And all this, too, remember I'm speaking, well, okay, I really am a nerd, plastic pocket protector, thick black glasses taped together and all, and the culture of my people is very different than the culture here in Washington.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
And I have a feeling I make a lot of public affairs officers nervous.
Well, you make some of them happy.
Well, how do I make more of them happy to let them know that I'm adorable and not that much of a threat?
That's right. Well, I think you're doing a great job already, but sort of soliciting the support, using the platforms that you have and that the Secretary have to make people aware about two things. I mean, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you come from and what color political flag you wave. No matter who you are and where you sit, taking care of veterans is it's a transcendent moral responsibility that we have as a nation. I think that people like you, Craig, in the private sector, and Secretary Shinseki, Deputy Secretary Gould, are just incredibly articulate, persuasive in moving people from a more passive posture to a more active posture. Can I volunteer at a hospital? Are there jobs that are in my corporation that are veteran ready, or that I could actually bring a veteran in and train them because we know that they have special skills? Providing higher quality of care, making sure veterans who receive about 50% of their care in the private sector, making sure that they have those records in some convenient form, and they're not schlepping around suitcases. These are true stories where people are schlepping around suitcases from place to place just so that they can say that they gave their doctor their records. That's not a useful use model.
Well, the whole deal with the Blue Button is that people can download, as it's developed, people can download their medical records.
Yes.
That's the gist of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a lesson, well, actually, I didn't have to learn the hard way. I watched this documentary where Dr. House reminds us how important family history is. Yeah. And this joke alternately delights and irritates my own doctor, but that's just life taking care of me, and especially as I descend into my sunset years, that's a major concern there. Mm-hmm. But the idea with veterans and also military families is that there apparently is this enormous, what they call a sea of goodwill. Organizations, and literally thousands of them throughout the country, want to help out and need help doing that, which I guess is something Veterans Affairs is doing with DOD and labor?
Exactly. So, no one person is going to be able to create the infrastructure platforms that enable all the things that we're talking about this afternoon. But when you have somebody like Eric Shinseki in charge and Scott Gould talking about it a lot, you're able to convene these folks. And we get a lot of support, as you know, from Matt Flavin and from Anish Chopra in the White House. These are folks who are more than just passively interested. They're actively trying to figure out ways that we create more substantial, more rugged services that scale, as we were talking about at the beginning, but also our improved services so that we can get and continue to provide the best care anywhere, veterans employment initiatives, and faster claims processing.
Okay. Well, for me, speaking kind of personally, the idea is that Americans who go, say, overseas and risk taking a bullet for me, I should play a little part. I'm toying with the idea of asking recruiters and HR people throughout the country to play a part and maybe go to do a little extra work to help out vets, let's say, looking at resumes and making suggestions. Yeah. Does this make any sense?
I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it would be extremely helpful. So, in our world, we had a slide up a few minutes ago where we're talking about millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of users. But when it comes to things like providing care, laying hands on, in a clinic, or providing veteran the kind of personal services that they're going to need to create a better resume, or to understand what the benefits are, or to encourage them to go back to school using the GI benefits, I personally think that no matter how rugged and logical and efficient our business processes are, the culture change is really sort of this one-on-one connection that all of us, each of us, whether you're a veteran or not, public sector, private sector, doesn't matter, each of us has an opportunity, and in my view, we have an obligation to do that outreach. So I strongly encourage that idea.
Okay, now I guess Veterans Day is coming up, and relatively soon. I assume we're going to see new stuff.
You're going to see some new stuff.
And I guess the deal is to get the word out and ask other people to help get the word out too.
You bet.
Things being done then, but also things going on beyond then. And the idea too is that, a lot of announcements will be made. They'll get into the newspaper November 12th. And I guess the challenge will be to keep talking about them then, let's say on November 18th, and also on, let's say, January 18th.
Exactly.
How much of a pain in the butt should I be?
Well, I don't think you're a pain in the butt at all. I think that to the extent that we can create the visibility, the story is important enough, I'd say even compelling enough on its own, that we just need to get that little snippet of attention. People say, hey, listen, you know, we're doing things that matter in healthcare. We're knocking down the claims backlog. We're taking active, proactive steps to start bringing people together to help write a resume, to do the skills translation, to create jobs.
Okay. So I guess a guy like me, well, see, I'm annoyed that I see when something goes wrong in Washington, there's a lot of ugly reporting. When things go right, no one hears about it. I guess since I'm not in government, I can blog about it or whatever. And maybe I can do things which you can't, like when you guys put out something, I can retweet it or do a Facebook share. I can also extend that offer to everything going on here. And I could even ask people in one part of government to then retweet or share good stuff being done by other people in the government.
Absolutely. We do that all the time, at least at our level, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to repeat that, if somebody in government asks me to get the word out using social media, maybe I can then ask other people in different parts of government to repeat that, because the only way sometimes a message gets out is through repetition. I have a feeling if public affairs officers weren't nervous before, they should be nervous now. Because sometimes we're responsible for our own PR. A great example of a nerd who was really bad at PR and went bankrupt, I hear, was Gutenberg. Because, you know, he didn't even know how to use his own gadget to get the word out until a social media guy named Luther did such a good job.
Yeah.
And now, you know, speaking as a nerd and part of our own community.
So can we control the content? Because I'm not sure that part worked out so well. Yeah.
One lesson from that Luther learned, that we've learned in modern day politics, you got to use social media to get the word out. But if you're using social media and relying on other people to get your message out, you know, other people are going to add their flavor. You lose control of your message right away. So you have to use social media to survive, but also by use of social media, you've lost control, and that may manifest itself in exciting ways.
I agree with you completely. I would add one more thing. I mean, social media for me is not really a why, it's a how, right? And the thing that we're doing sort of behind the scenes, as you know well, that don't get a lot of press, they're kind of grungy, they're kind of nerdy, people don't generally need or want to understand this, are the infrastructure things that make it more rugged, make it more modular, make it more open. In this crowd, I think you appreciate a lot. It's a pretty tech-savvy crowd. But we didn't talk today about open source as an example, where we're taking these monolithic programs and starting to open up the API. So that's not the same. It doesn't have the glamour that a Craig or a Craigslist does, but it is a profound change inside the organization that creates the things that you and I get to talk about on stage.
Yeah, I'm like the Lady Gaga of the internet, except that Lady Gaga is the Lady Gaga of the internet.
Yeah.
But the deal is simply that a lot of good things happen. Yeah. The word doesn't get out. The open source stuff means better customer service, and it also means better return to for the taxpayer dollar. All this stuff ain't bad.
Yeah, not bad. Well, thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, bye, everybody.